Late summer, 480 BCE. The northern approaches to Thermopylae. What Persian officers wrote in their campaign records could never fully explain what they saw that day. Spartan hoplites were executing coordinated movements that broke every assumption Persian commanders had about battlefield control. There were no shouted orders, no signal flags, no messengers running through the ranks, yet Spartan units moved together with precision. Through dust and heat, across uneven ground, the phalanx advanced, halted, and shifted, as if guided by a single mind. Shields locked, spears angled, gaps closed before they fully opened. To Persian soldiers watching from the outside, it looked impossible. From the Persian perspective, this should not have worked. Persian armies relied on visible command, drums, horns, signal standards, officers shouting orders. When visibility was good and formations were intact, this system worked well. But when dust filled the air, when noise swallowed commands, or when terrain broke lines of sight, coordination collapsed. Units fought bravely, but they fought separately. The Spartans did not. What Persian commanders never realized was simple and devastating. Spartan communication did not depend on orders. It depended on training. From the age of 7, Spartan boys entered the agog. This was not training meant to create individual heroes. It was designed to produce something else. Men who thought the same way, moved the same way, reacted the same way. Every Spartan learned how much pressure to apply through a shield. They learned how foot placement signaled advance or hold. They learned how spear angle communicated intent. These were not conscious decisions. They were reflexes. To a Spartan, the phalanx was not a unit. It was an extension of the body. Modern descriptions often call the Spartan phalanx rigid. That is wrong. It was elastic. When pressure increased in one section, nearby ranks adjusted automatically. When a man fell, the line closed without command. When terrain narrowed, files compressed instinctively. When an opening appeared, it was exploited without waiting for permission. This was distributed decision-making, 2,000 years before the concept had a name. Each Spartan carried his own weapon, his own shield, and part of the shared intelligence of the formation. To Persian observers, this coordination looked supernatural. In reality, it was an ancient battlefield network, not built from signals, but built from shared conditioning. When Persian infantry first engaged Spartan lines, they expected disorder. They expected confusion after contact. Instead, they met a wall that absorbed impact and returned it instantly. Persian troops pushed forward. They were met by synchronized spear thrusts that rippled across the line. Units that tried to flank found the formation already angled to meet them. Pressure points were reinforced before Persian officers could react. Orders were issued. They arrived too late. The Spartans had already adjusted. In Persian armies, command traveled slower than reality. An officer had to see a problem, then decide, then issue an order, then wait for compliance. In Spartan formations, all of that happened at once. The formation felt pressure, and it responded. This meant Persian units were always reacting to the previous moment. Spartans operated in the current one. The difference sounds small. It is not. It is decisive. At Thermopylae, the narrow pass amplified this advantage. Persian numbers meant nothing when only a few men could fight at once. The battlefield became a test of cohesion under stress. Persian assaults came in waves. Each wave broke. Not because Persians lacked courage, but because their system required coordination, the environment denied them. Spartans did not need to see the whole battlefield. They only needed to feel the men beside them. Persian officers reached the wrong conclusion. They believed Spartans were simply braver, stronger, more disciplined. They thought they were facing elite soldiers. They did not understand they were facing a superior system. This misunderstanding shaped Persian decisions throughout the campaign. They rotated units. They escalated force. They increased pressure. But they never addressed the real problem. You cannot outnumber a system that fights as one. Even after Thermopylae, the lesson went unlearned. At Plataea, at Mycale, across the Aegean, Persian armies continued to rely on centralized command. Greek forces, especially Spartans, continued to rely on shared doctrine. The gap widened. Sparta did not win because its soldiers were invincible. They were not. Sparta won because it removed the need for communication at the moment it mattered most. Orders are fragile. Systems endure. Modern militaries would rediscover this truth centuries later. Mission command, decentralized initiative, shared doctrine. Sparta practiced all of it, without writing it down. By the time Persian leadership understood that Spartan strength lay not in weapons, but in coordination, the war was already lost. They prepared to fight men. They were not prepared to fight a system. The Persian Empire believed communication required commands. Sparta proved it could exist without them. And on the battlefields of ancient Greece, that invisible advantage decided the fate of empires. Not louder orders, not better weapons, but men trained so completely that silence itself became a weapon. Now, what made this difference even more dangerous for Persia was that it could not be copied quickly. The Persian Empire could recruit soldiers by the tens of thousands. It could build roads, supply depots, and fleets. It could replace losses, but it could not manufacture Spartan coordination on demand. That system took decades. It required boys trained from childhood to think less as individuals and more as parts of a whole. It required discipline enforced not by officers, but by culture. It required trust so complete that a man could step forward, knowing the shield beside him would be there. Persia could imitate weapons, it could imitate armor, it could not imitate that. This is why later Persian commanders increasingly relied on mercenaries. Greek hoplites were hired in large numbers, not because Persians admired Greek courage, but because they recognized something missing in their own forces: cohesion. Even then, mercenaries could never fully replicate Spartan unity. They fought for pay. Spartans fought for the man next to them. That distinction mattered. The irony is that Persia understood communication at the strategic level better than anyone. The royal road, mounted couriers, administrative precision across thousands of miles. Persia mastered long-distance coordination. But it failed at the moment-to-moment reality of combat, where seconds mattered, where hesitation killed, where silence could be more powerful than commands. Sparta lived in that space. This lesson did not disappear with the Persian Wars. It echoed forward through history. Roman legions would later adopt similar principles: standardized training, shared drills, automatic response to pressure. Centuries later, modern militaries would rediscover the same truth: that the fastest army is not the one with the best orders. It is the one that does not need them. In modern terms, Spartan warfare looks less like ancient combat and more like a highly trained emergency response system. Every soldier understands intent. Every soldier knows the plan. Every soldier can act without waiting. That is why Spartan lines could bend without breaking, why they could advance under pressure, why they could absorb shock that shattered larger armies. Persian commanders never fully understood this. They saw discipline, they saw bravery, they saw stubborn resistance, but they misidentified the source. They thought Spartan strength came from willpower, it came from design. And this misunderstanding shaped Persian strategy again and again. They tried to overwhelm, they tried to exhaust, they tried to intimidate. None of it worked, because they were fighting the wrong thing. They were fighting bodies, not the system controlling them. In the end, Sparta's greatest weapon was not the spear. It was not the shield. It was not even courage. It was predictability to allies and unreadability to enemies. Persian armies never knew when Spartans would advance, or how they would adjust, or why their lines never seemed to collapse. They only knew that once contact was made, the Spartan formation responded faster than thought. This is why ancient historians struggled to explain Spartan success. Words like discipline and valor were not enough. They sensed something deeper, something structural. But they lacked the language to describe it. Today, we would call it emergent coordination, a system where order arises without commands, where intelligence exists at the collective level, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Sparta mastered that system. Persia did not, and that is why the Persian Empire lost battles it should have won. Not because it lacked men, not because it lacked resources, but because it faced an enemy that had solved a problem Persia did not know existed: how to fight together without being told how. The Persian armies never realized this until it was too late. They believed silence meant confusion. Sparta turned silence into control. And on the killing grounds of ancient Greece, that invisible advantage shaped the fate of empires. Not through louder commands, not through better weapons, but through men trained so completely that communication itself disappeared. And when communication disappears, only coordination remains.